think we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome to NPAC's FIMS Learning Webinar series focusing on understanding grant adjustments. A couple of housekeeping notes. We will be recording this session, and you'll be able to find a link to this in our knowledge base. If you have any questions during the presentation, please enter it in the Q&A below. I'm Amy Strom, the Director of Client Success here at NPAC, and today you have the pleasure of learning about grant adjustments within FIMS from Robin, and we also have Leanne in the wings helping with questions. With that, I'll pass this off to Robin to review the agenda.
Hi, everybody. Today's agenda is going to cover an overview of grant adjustments. When we're going to look at how to cancel and refund grants, we're also going to look at making various corrections to historical grants, including correcting the fund or the amount, the grantee, the grant date, and the grant number. And then any questions that you might have, Leanne will be happy to answer, or I can answer as well at the end. So welcome, everybody.
Great. I think we're ready to see it in action, Robin.
All right, let me share my screen. Okay. Thanks for attending, everybody. Our topic today, a lot of people think of grant adjustments and they think, oh goodness, where the heck do I start? Totally get it. I totally understand. So grant adjustments typically only pertain to changes made to posted grants. There's one exception to that, and that is if you are changing the grant number. You can change a grant number on either a posted grant or an unposted grant. So that's really the only one that pertains to posted and unposted. Otherwise, if you have an unposted application, it's very easy to make any changes. Nothing has been posted into history at that point. So anything can be changed. Now, the adjustment utilities are accessible in two different ways. So one of them is from the application history tab in the grants module, and there is a tab for adjustments. So that'll give you access to the adjustments. And then the other way is if you are actually in an application and you right-click on the line item in the payment plan tab, you have the ability to adjust a grant. So there's two different ways that you can access grant adjustments. There are sorry about that. My grant module is acting kind of funky. Okay, so under the adjustment tab, there are three main types of grant adjustments available in FIMS. One of them is a cancellation, and a cancellation can be a partial cancellation for the unpaid balance, or it can be a full cancellation. The second type of grant adjustments is a refund, and that can be a refund of a portion of the grant or a full refund. That's your second type. And then the third type is corrections, and there are actually 7 different corrections that are available to you in FIMS. And let me just go in here. So in the adjustment window, the amount correction can be used if the grant was posted with the wrong amount. You can increase or decrease, or you can even reduce the amount to 0 for some, if in case you've entered a grant twice and one of them just needs to go away. You can also make a fund correction. So if this was posted to a wrong fund, or if you just need to change which fund part of the grant is going to be paid from, that can also be done. Now you can make payment date changes, but the payment date changes are only available for unpaid grants, because once it's paid, there'd be no need to do a payment date correction. What will happen is in the payment plan tab, the due date will be updated, but the accounts payable, the open item, will also be updated with the new payment date. The grantee can be changed if it's the wrong grantee. So that would actually be done from here. So that's the correction here for grantee. It will update your grant history, your application history, and it will also update the payee, the grantee, and accounts payable. You can change the grant date as well. So if the grant is posted with the wrong date, that can be changed. So just a little info about this particular grant date correction. This updates grant history, but it does not have any impact on general ledger. So if the date that you're changing this to is not within the same month, you're most likely going to have to create journal entries to adjust when that grant expense hit your general ledger. So something to keep in mind, because this grant date adjustment makes no changes in general ledger. So most likely you are definitely going to have to make a journal entry in general ledger. You can change the grant number. You also do that from out here, and that is for both posted or unposted grants. And then the other one that we're going to look at in more detail is the create a new payment. So if for some reason at the time that the grant was approved, you didn't really know what the payment plan looked like, so everything was posted to just a single payment line, you can come back in here after the fact and create new payments. So these are all of the adjustment types that we're going to look at during today's session. The other thing that I want to suggest is that you create some adjustment type codes. So as you're making these adjustments on the grants, it's a good idea to assign an adjustment type. And the actual code table that I'm referring to is the application status. So if you look here, I have some additional status codes. When I make an amount correction, I change the status to A. I have cancellation complete, cancellation partial. So these are, I also have ones for refunds in here, refund partial, refund complete. This helps identify from a reporting perspective if you are filtering your application history reports based on status. This can help with that, and it's quick. It's also quick to be able to see that it's been adjusted. All right, I'm going to switch. I'm going to walk through the fields that are available to you on the payment plan. Hold on for 1 second here. I just need to find the right grant. Sorry. Okay. All right. So this is the payment plan tab on the application in application history. And there's columns here. So for example, adjustment number, this is actually assigning a number to the adjustment. The adjustment user, this is the person that actually was logged in at the time that made the adjustment on this application. The next column tells me what type of correction was made, what type of adjustment. So if you see there's a amount correction was done and then a new payment item was created. There's also a column that tells you when the adjustment was made and what the adjustment apply date is going to be. And down at the bottom, you would see the reason for the adjustment. And if the total grant amount had changed, you would also see that in the current amount field. So all of these pieces of information can be seen on the payment plan tab. Okay, what we're going to do, I'm going to walk through the different types of adjustments that can be done. And the first one that we're going to do is a grant cancellation. So one of the things to think about, and this has to do more so from an accounting perspective than just a grant perspective, is if you cancel a grant in the same year, because what happens when the grant gets canceled, it goes back against the grant expense account. If you're canceling a grant in the same year, that's fine. But if you're canceling a grant in the next year, you're going to probably want to think about creating a return grants revenue account, because if you don't and it hits grants expense, it's going to have an impact on the total grants expense in your general ledger for that new year because the grant was approved in a prior year. So something to think about from that perspective. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to do this first adjustment is going to be a full cancellation. So I'm going to go to the adjustments tab and I'm going to run process. And up here, it tells me what the grant number is that I'm adjusting. The apply date right here is what is the apply date for this adjustment. So the original grant date was July 10th. I'm going to use the same date because it's in the same year. And then I'm going to change my status to cancellation complete and the reason for the adjustment. It's always good to put in a reason for adjustment in case somebody else looks at this and wonders why that took place, or even 6 months down the road, you might look back at this and say, why did I do that? So anytime you have the ability to add some text to explain why you're doing something, it's a good idea. And then on the right-hand side over here, we're going to click the radio button for cancellation. And because this is a complete cancellation, I'm going to check the box that says, and if you notice some little help text shows up as my cursor is hovering over the complete cancellation, it basically says completely cancel total unpaid portion. And when I click on that, down below in the line number 1, it says line item amount $3,000, amount paid is 0. The new amount is 0 because I'm doing a complete cancellation here. Now, if the grant voucher has not been posted in accounts payable, when I process this adjustment on the grant side, that accounts payable voucher will be deleted. If the grant voucher has been posted, the grant adjustment routine is going to create a debit memo, which you will need to edit and post in accounts payable so that the open grant voucher will be reversed and backed out, and then follow that posting all the way through to general ledger to make sure general ledger is seeing the same information. Down here, I'm going to click on process adjustment at this point. And it's telling me to review the changes on the report and then click commit changes on the menu. It also says if a debit memo is created from this process, it must be posted in accounts payable. One thing that really doesn't have anything to do per se with the grant adjustments, is that when these messages pop up in the screen, I know a lot of people after a while, they get tired of seeing them and they stop reading them. It is a really good idea to still keep reading them because it does remind you that you need to go to accounts payable and post a debit memo. Because if you don't do that, the only module that's going to be correct after this is completed will be the grant module. Accounts payable and general ledger will be out of sync with the grants module. So it is a good idea to still keep reading them, as tedious as they might be. Okay, so here's the FIMS viewer with the grant adjustment to basically saying what is happening. So my original amount was $3,000. The canceled amount was $3,000 because I'm doing a complete cancellation. The remaining amount is $0. And then up here, you have a commit changes menu item button. And it's telling me that the changes have been committed. And again, it's just giving me that little reminder about the debit memo. So I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to close this. I'm going to go to accounts payable. So in accounts payable, item entry is where you'll go for any unposted AP vouchers or grant vouchers. And here we go, voucher number 214. Here is my grant debit memo with my $3,000. So until I actually post this in accounts payable, and it's going to still be sitting out here as an open item waiting to be paid. So you will have to go to processes and edit and post. And you follow the same edit and post process as you would with anything else in accounts payable. Now, that's a full cancellation. So I'm going to pull up a different grant. And we're going to look at partial cancellation. So this, if I go to my AP activity tab, so this is a $3,500 payment. And if I go to the AP activity tab, I can see that $1,000 of this has been paid. So there's a $2,500 balance. And we're going to go ahead and cancel this. So if you go to the adjustments tab, go to grant adjustments. Again, we start at the very top on the left-hand corner. Here's the grant number. Here's the grant amount and the grant date. So now we're going to need to put in our apply date. I'm going to use July 10th because that's very recent. And then here we're going to assign the status code of cancellation partial. And then we're going to use the same button, the cancellation. And then down here, we're going to come in. We're not going to do, actually, we are going to do a complete cancellation. If you check the box, it's going to say that the new amount is $1,000 because that's what's been paid. So it's going to cancel the $2,500. You could have not checked the box and just come down here and put in $1,000 as well. So now we're going to click on process adjustment. Here's our little reminder. Don't forget about the debit memo. And here's the report, commit changes. So at this point, we're going to commit changes and you would go to accounts payable and edit and post that through. But it's showing the original amount for $3,500, the canceled amount, and the remaining amount. So if I was to go back to my payment plan tab now, I would see that this particular line item, the $2,500, is a cancellation. The adjustment date, the apply date was July 10th. The original amount is $3,500. The current amount is $1,000, and the reason for the adjustment. All right, the next thing we're going to take a look at is a grant refund. So let me pull up our okay. So this is a 2022 grant, and my database is in a 2023 year. So when you think about refunds, there's a couple different things that could happen. So the grantee could send back the entire amount. If you had sent this person, this organization, a $5,000 check, they could send you back your check, which could happen, or they could have deposited the check and send you back their own check. The difference being here is what you have to think about is if they send you back your own check, it's easy enough to void the check in the accounts payable module. But if they send you back their own check, whether it's for the full amount or whether it's for a partial amount, you can't void the check because it's been cashed. So you will have to make sure that you record that money coming back in, and that money can be recorded in one of two ways. You could either record a non-gift in the gift module for the check that came back in, or you can put in the debit and credit accounts. When we walk through the adjustment, you'll see that. Put in the debit and credit amounts and let the adjustment itself actually create the journal entries for you to show that that money is coming back in to FIMS. So I'm going to go to adjustments. Actually, I'm going to go to the AP activity tab so you can see here that the payment, it's been paid in full. And so we're going to go to grant adjustments. And here's our grant number. And here is the grant date. So the money was sent back in 2023. So when you record that money coming back in, you're probably going to want to make sure that you hit a return grants revenue account instead of grants expense, because this is happening in a different year from when the grant was originally expensed. All right, so the apply date I'm going to leave as today because the grant date was last year. The status, I'm going to come down here and I'm going to find, we're going to do a partial refund. And my reason for adjustment, you can tell I'm not very creative today. And then on the right-hand side, we're going to click the little ready button for refund. So what we have here is a couple check boxes. One of them says complete refund, which I don't want to check because I didn't get the whole $5,000 back. So what I'll do is I will come down here and I'll say that I was returned $2,000. Now there is a reinstate grant amount checkbox right here. And if I was to just follow through and complete this grant refund right now, what would happen is the refund would be booked back to the grant, and my new grant amount would only be $3,000. But let's say, for example, that maybe this was a scholarship and the student still needed this money to be paid out, but to a different school. So you don't want this grant or this scholarship to be reduced to $3,000. You want that $2,000 available to be paid out to a different school. That's what this reinstate grant amount is for. What this is going to do is it's going to create a grant voucher for you for $2,000 so that you can turn around and pay that out to somebody different, a different school if that's where, if the kid has changed schools. So reinstate grant amount, that's what that's for. Okay, so down below, I have put in how much our refunded amount is, and if we scroll over to the right-hand side, here's the place where I can put in my debit and credit accounts. So if I click the drop down here, I need to find my grant refund account, returned grants revenue. So my revenue account is going to be return grants revenue, and my cash account will be whatever cash account the money is going back into. If I didn't want the system to auto create the journal entries for me in General Ledger, and I wanted to have a record of the actual check number and everything coming back in, I could record a non-gift in the gift module, debiting and crediting these same two accounts, but then it would be something that could be reported on and would be a separate entry in the gift module. So there's two different ways that you can do this. And if I click on process adjustment, I'm going to save my changes. Here's my little reminder. And here's my report. So here is my original amount, $5,000. $2,000 was refunded. That means I now have a $3,000 grant. Okay, so let me just commit changes. I'm going to close this. And all you would have to do at this point is enter your non-gift or edit and post the journal entry that was just created. The next one we're going to take a look at is an amount correction. So let me find, and I'm not following the other pieces of that refund simply because we're not going to have enough time today to, and I want to make sure we get through all of the grant adjustments. All right. So this one is going to be an amount correction. And under my AP activity tab, you can see that I haven't paid anything yet. This is a $400 grant, and there is a grant voucher in accounts payable, and this has not been paid. Now, one thing I do want to mention here, this little column that says AP, what happens when you post a grant through to accounts payable? The voucher number that it assigns to that grant number, that grant voucher, is the actual grant number itself. And then depending on how many payment line items there are for that grant, it'll create separate vouchers. So in this case, I only have one payment at the moment. So the voucher number in accounts payable would be the 2019-0007 with a 01 at the end of it. If I had two payment line items, I'd have two grant vouchers. One of them would have 01 at the end. The other one would have 02. So just a little bit of information with regards to that. All right, so we're going to go into grant adjustments and we're going to run the process. Again, we're going to look up, here's our grant number, here's the grant amount. My grant date is kind of old. We're going to ignore that. The apply date, we're going to pretend that this is 2020. And I'm going to change my status to amount correction. Over on the right-hand side, the very first option that I have is amount correction, and that's already checked. So down here, if you look, I'm going to tell FIMS that this is really a $500 grant. And I'm going to click on the save button. So when you're doing an amount correction, you can increase the amount of the grant. You can decrease the amount of the grant, or you could, maybe you entered the same grant twice. You could actually change the new amount to $0 because you need to have it out of the system, but it's really not a grant cancellation. It was just a duplicate grant that was added to the system. And then we'll process the adjustment. And here's our FIMS viewer. So here's the original amount is $400 and the corrected amount is $500. Now I already have a posted grant voucher over in accounts payable. So this adjustment routine is going to create a debit memo to increase this $400 grant to a $500 grant. And if I go to accounts payable, so here is my All Stars project. So the grant debit memo, if you look, it has a negative number, which at first, if you just look at that, you think, wait, I'm not reducing this grant, I'm increasing the grant by $100. A negative debit memo will increase the voucher, and a positive debit memo decreases the voucher. So just something to remember. All right, the next one that we're going to take a look at is the fund correction. And I'm going to find my grant number. All right, so here is the number where we're going to adjust the fund. And here's the payment plan right now. So as you can see, I actually have this $2,000 grant is split between two different payments with two different dates. And my AP column has a 01 and a 02. That means that I have two grant vouchers in accounts payable, each for $1,000 with two different due dates. Now, this can be used for one of two different ways. So you can use the fund correction on a grant that has been fully paid, or you can use this fund correction on a grant that has not been paid. And if the grant has been paid when you make this adjustment, the adjustment's made to the historic grant, and it updates the grant voucher in the history tab in accounts payable, and it creates journal entries in general ledger, which will need to be edited and posted. So this fund correction works for both paid or unpaid. So if I go to my adjustments tab, we're going to change the fund on that second payment. So if I go to adjustments, in the upper left, I have my grant number and my grant date. So we're going to use our 7/10 date. And we're going to change the status to, do I have a fund correction? I do not. So we're going to fib and say it was an amount correction. On the right-hand side of the screen, I'm going to check the box for fund correction. And if you look down below, you can see that I have two line items. So line item 01 is my grant voucher and 02. So we're going to go into line item 02 and we're going to change this new to my fund. So we're going to say that this is going to be paid from my fund instead. And we're going to make that change and save it. So now I'm going to click on process adjustment. Here's my reminder about my debit memo. So if you look, line item number 2 here is telling me my old fund was Hunt, what my new fund is, and I'm going to commit changes. So I'm going to say, okay, we're going to go to accounts payable. And I'm going to refresh my view. I forgot who that grant was to. Sorry, the gifted child. So right here, we have a grant debit memo that has $0, which makes total sense because we are not changing the grant amount at all. We are changing the fund. So here is our debit memo. It's a positive and a negative $1,000, just moving it from the Hunt Fund to my fund. And then once this is edited and posted, this will create the entries in General Ledger and all three modules will be in sync. All right, we're going to look at changing. The next one we're going to look at is the payment date. All right, so here is the grant that we're going to adjust. And this adjustment lets you change dates on this tab right here. All right, so we're going to go to the Adjustments tab, go into Run Process, make sure our information is correct, your apply date, your status, and then on the right-hand side, you're going to check the radio button for payment date. And in the new date, so over here on the left, you've got the original payment date. And in the new date field, you're going to put in whatever that new date happens to be. Save your change and process your adjustment. Here's your little reminder. So here's the old date and here's the new date, July 1st. And I'm going to commit my changes. So my grant voucher, my open grant voucher and accounts payable now has a due date of July 1st on it. So this way, your due date in accounts payable in the payment plan in the grants module are in sync and have the same information. All right, the next one is grantee. We're going to do the grantee adjustment. So let me pull up the grant. I'm going to go to the Adjustment tab. I'm going to click on the grantee correction, run process. This is basically telling you what it is going to do. It alters grant history and the payee and accounts payable if the grant is still unpaid and on the grantee. All right, so up here, here's my grant number. And then it gives me a little bit of information in the middle of the screen. And then down here, I can pick a new grantee organization. We'll choose the Millville Arts Council. We're going to update pay information and we'll say okay. So no financial implications on this. There's nothing that needs to hit General Ledger. The next one we're going to take a look at is grant date. So we're going to go into the Adjustments tab. We're going to click on Grant Date, Run Process. So here is the grant number showing up here, and then I can choose a new date. So this one, again, very simple, straightforward. You're just going to change the date here and save it, but it's not creating any journal entries in General Ledger. So if this, you need to move the expense from whatever current or the month that the grant was expensed originally and make a journal entry, you'll need to make a journal entry in General Ledger because this routine does not update General Ledger at all. Okay, the next one is going to be grant number. So grant number, pretty straightforward as well. If you click on correction grant number run process. It gives you a little bit of information about what it's actually doing, but you can choose from either a posted grant number or an unposted grant number that you want to change. Pick the grant number from the drop down because you have access to all of the grants, the posted grants. And then down here, you're going to change the grant number. So the scoop with this is you may need, before you actually come in here and adjust and change the grant number, you might actually need to go in and change the next grant number in the set automatic numbers in your system utilities. This is kind of commonly used, changing the grant number, if you are using a numbering sequence for your grants that each year starts off with the year. So if you went into 2023, started creating new grants, and they were all coming up with the automatically assigned grant number of 2022, you would want to make sure that you had the next available number would be 2023. So you would have to set that first in set automatic numbers. So if this is not something that you have access to, you might need to get your system admin to do this for you. But the very first item here is grant number, and it's saying what's the next grant number to be used. And this is where you can update what that number is. So it might be a combination using the correction grant number and set automatic numbers to make changes to that, and just be careful when you're doing that to make sure that the numbering sequences are working out the way they're supposed to be. And the last one we're going to look at is creating a new payment. So let's say, for example, when you approved this and posted this, you did not know what the payment plan was going to look like. So everything was posted to just a single payment to the John Adams Fund here. Well, we're going to go in and we're going to split that out now. So our grant number, will change this to July 11th. And we will put in new payment. And then over here, we're going to click create payment. So in order to, and this can be a little bit confusing, in order to create another payment, you're going to copy the one that's currently there. So now I have two payments. This one is going to be $2,500. And this one is also going to be $2,500, but my date on this one might be August 11th instead of July 11th. So the key here, the thing is that can be frustrating if you forget, is the new button does not create a new line item. You have to make sure that you've highlighted the grant voucher that's here and click on the copy, and then you can come in down below and make your changes. And I'll click on process adjustment. Here's my debit memo reminder. So essentially in this report, it's showing me that the original amount was $5,000. The new amount is $2,500. I have a new payment line item of $2,500 on 8/11. I'm going to commit changes. And then I'm going to go to accounts payable. And here is our debit memo. So I'm reducing, because it's a positive number, my original grant voucher of $5,000, and I'm creating a new grant voucher, which is a negative for $2,500. So once these two are posted, I'll have two grant vouchers out there, one each for $2,500, and general ledger will see this as well. So that's the last of the grant adjustments. We are running out of time here. So what I do want to let you know is that in addition to making all these adjustments, there's always some sort of reporting ramifications. So in the handout that I put together for everyone, there is a section at the end that is grant adjustments and reports. So it's basically going to kind of walk you through what reports will feature which pieces and the difference between transaction date and a grant date. So it's pretty detailed as far as from the reporting. So hopefully that'll be helpful. And that's it. I'm going to turn it back over to Amy.
Thank you, Robin. That was great information. We have no questions waiting. We will be sending out, like Robin said, her handout along with the recorded message of this presentation. So please reach out if you do come up with other questions that you would like answered by our FIMS team. And again, thank you all for coming today. We'll see you at our next Let's Talk Solutions on Wednesday, October 11th. If you have additional topics you'd like to see us cover, please shoot us an email and we'll add them to our list. Thanks all for coming.